Well, yesterday the Federal Reserve increased the interest rate for federal funds. Um, so, what does that mean? And how does that impact the real estate market? Well, when the Federal Reserve increases the federal funds interest rate, that means short term borrowing is more expensive. So, companies aren't able to um, borrow from the government as much as they would if the interest rate were lower and be able to use that money to expand their businesses or whatnot. And a lot of times companies uh, borrow from the government to keep things status quo with their business, and so they don't lay people off. That being said, since they're not going to be borrowing as much from the government with the higher interest rates, it's likely there's going to be more layoffs coming this year. Um, some companies have already laid people off, such as Intel, right here in Folsom. Um, Fortunately for the Sacramento area, the majority of the jobs in Sacramento are jobs that aren't very easily just laid off. We have state workers; they're not getting laid off. The healthcare industry is huge here. That's the largest industry, and they're not getting laid off. So, how uh, the Federal Reserve's interest rate hike affects us is going to be much different than it affects the rest of the country in general. So things are relatively safe here. That being said, it does not necessarily impact mortgage rates when it comes to real estate. Okay, so mortgage rates are not necessarily tied to the federal funds rate because it's a long-term loan. Okay, the federal funds rate's for short-term loans. So, for instance, last time there was a rate hike, it was a 50-point rate hike. Yesterday was a 25-point rate hike. But the last time it was a 50-point rate hike, and at that time, the mortgage rate actually dropped. So you see, they're not actually tied together. Now, with inflation starting to cool, as the Federal Reserve Chair mentioned yesterday, we probably not going to see rate hikes beyond 25 points going forward. That being said, according to the Federal Reserve Chair, we're probably not going to see any rate cuts either as far as the federal funds goes. Mortgage rates, they're probably not going to come down much, if at all, and it will fluctuate. They always do. They generally do fluctuate up and down over time. So throughout this year, I'm expecting the mortgage rates to be around where they are now the rest of the year. You never know; it could drop halfway through the year. We'll see how things go over the next quarter, but I'm expecting them to be relatively around where they are now. Now, to make sense of what may or may not happen, no one has a crystal ball. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with the real estate market and values and all that. But we can take a look at some data. And one of the sets of data we look at is the homes sold versus homes listed chart over time. So let's take a look at that chart going back 5 years. What we're looking at here is a chart that shows the number of homes sold versus the number of homes listed for sale over the last 5 years. It's broken up monthly. There's a light green bar and a dark green bar for each month. The light green represents the homes for sale. The dark green represents the homes that sold during that month. You can see there's a pattern that holds true here over time. And there's no reason to believe that this pattern won't continue to hold true over time going into the future. If you notice, in January you have the least homes sold in each one of these years. And after January, the number of homes sold goes up. The number of homes listed also goes up as the year gets closer to summer after January. Okay, the only years that really off here are the COVID years. The pattern still holds true. The difference is there's much less homes on the market. You can see that there's more homes on the market during the summer than there was in the winter. But it's a lot less. But the number of buyers stayed the same, and that caused the values of the homes to skyrocket because there weren't that many homes to choose from. But you still had all these buyers. So there was a lot of buyers all competing for the same homes as all the other buyers because there wasn't a surplus of homes like there generally is. If you go back to a few years before COVID, there's a surplus of homes on the market. There's about double the amount of homes on the market as there are homes sold in each of those months. During COVID, it was the same amount of homes as there were buyers, and sometimes there were more buyers than there were homes. There's a few months here where there are more homes sold than homes were listed that month, which is unheard of. It's crazy. And that's why you had that big boom in the property values. But then this past year, the interest rates, mortgage rates skyrocketed. They significantly increased, and that caused buyers to kind of go away. So here we have this huge decrease in the number of buyers. Now, normally you do have a decrease in buyers after the summer. You start getting that decrease. You can see that pattern here, but it's not nearly as steep as of a decrease in previous years as it was this year. In fact, what's not on here on this chart is the January numbers of 2023. In January, the numbers of homes sold was even lower. Okay, if you look down here, it shows 759 homes sold in January. Okay, that's about half as much of what sold last year during the same time. 759. Where would that be on this chart? 759 would be about right here, which is much lower than any other January over the last 5 years. So we're even lower than any other January going back 5 years. Now, that means it's a great time for buyers because what's going to happen is we're basically looking at a situation where we don't have very many buyers. And we're going to continue to see a lack of buyers because mortgage rates are still high. But we are going to see an increase in the number of homes on the market. Okay, people are going to be listing their homes during the spring, as they always do. Okay, buyers are still going to be kind of scared off because of interest rates, which means it's a great time to buy. And when those interest rates do finally come back down, what's going to happen to the number of buyers? You're going to go from down here where it is right now to going back up here where it belongs. And when that happens, all the prices of all the homes are going to go back up again. So if you've been waiting to buy, we're near a bottom here where we're at right now. And once we start to pivot and the mortgage rates start to go back down to the 3s and 4s, then the values of homes are going to bounce back up again and go back on its normal trajectory that we had before COVID. As you saw on the chart, we can expect the amount of homes going on the market to increase over the next few months going into the middle of summer. It's a pattern that's held true going back as far as we have records, and there's no reason to believe that's not going to hold true this year. The number of buyers will go up between now and the middle of summer, as always. However, I believe it's not going to go up. The amount of buyers is not going to go up as much as it normally does because interest rates are still high and people are still afraid to buy a house when the interest rates are higher, which to me in this situation is the wrong way to look at it, because next year when interest rates are lower, and I expect them to be much lower, then the value of homes are going to go up, and now you're going to have more buyers, and you're going to have more competition. And so the better thing to do, in my opinion, is to buy now, this year, and then when interest rates go back down and home values go back up, then you refinance. Now you got the house at a lower cost and you have the lower interest rate at the same time, cutting your monthly payments down along with it. That's how I would work it. Remember, a house is not a home until it's full of heart. Have a wonderful day. You deserve it.